honored to introduce to you someone who's been a friend of American Promise since he entered Congress in 2018, and pleased to announce he has perfect attendance at NCLC since he's entered Congress, has not missed a single conference. Congressman Dean Phillips has served the people of Minnesota's 3rd Congressional District since being elected in 2018. He defeated a longtime Republican member and is the first Democrat to hold this seat since 1960. Congressman Phillips brings a wealth of experience from the business sector, where he managed and grew his family's business, Phillips Distillery, along with other business ventures, such as Talenti Gelato, a personal favorite of mine. So if you ever have a chance to try the chocolate, the coffee chocolate chip, I highly recommend it. Congressman Phillips and his family understand service and sacrifice all too well. Congressman Phillips lost his father in Vietnam when he was only 6 months old. It was that sense of service that brought Congressman Phillips to Congress and what brings him with us tonight. He's a member of the House Problem Solvers Caucus, a bipartisan group of lawmakers who look to find ways to work across the aisle to address the important issues, like reducing the amount of unlimited money that is poured into our elections. It's that kind of attitude and spirit that we need more of here in Washington to confront this issue that we face here today. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to introduce to you Congressman Dean Phillips.
Good evening, everybody. Whoa. I'm so glad I number my speech pages. I thank you, Bill, for the introduction, to Jeff, to Andrew, congratulations, Rick, and to all of you. I think this is the most important room in America right now, and I mean that, yeah. And I mean that very sincerely, and I also want to thank you. John Katko's a good friend, and as you know, sadly, in fact, we're losing too many of the most principled in Congress, on both sides of the aisle, John among them. And as the vice chair of the Problem Solvers Caucus, I work closely with John. I was recently ranked the most bipartisan member of the House, the Senate, and every governorship combined. But I'll tell you, that doesn't get celebrated in too many rooms. And that's why I'm grateful to be in front of you. And I want to thank you because I've been looking for something to give John Katko as a little going away present. So I took a snapshot of that freeze frame. And you gave me the best gift, not to mention the 3-minute delay allowed me to finish a little dinner. So thank you. It really is an honor to be with all of you, and I'm very grateful. I have a singular mission in Congress. It's to restore faith in our government, which is waning, and for good reason. It's what inspired my run for Congress in the first place, in fact. If not, I think all of you, I hope all of you, were repulsed in 2016 by that presidential election. Particularly the behavior of one of the two major party candidates whose name or whose identity I will protect. But I woke up the morning after that, and I walked into my daughter's room, and that moment left an indelible mark on me. She was crying. She was FaceTiming with her sister, who was 18 years old and in college, had voted for the first time in that election. And at that very moment, I recognized I had raised my daughters to be participants, not observers. And I promised them then and there that I would do something. And here I am. And thank goodness we still live in a country where that is possible. And I wish more Americans would face that very same moment where you got to put it on the line and do something about it. And that's what I've done. And frankly, it's been a joyful process. I started it in 2017. I wanted to do it differently. I was so disgusted with the tenor and tone of politics that I wanted to bring a little bit of joy to this endeavor, a little bit of hopefulness, a little bit of fun, and a welcoming ethos. In fact, our slogan continues to be, everyone's invited, and I meant it sincerely. I was the first Democrat actually elected in 60 years, and I wanted to find a metaphor that reminded people about how long it had been, and I wanted something invitational. So I bought a 1960 International Harvester Metro van. I rechristened her the government repair truck. Many said I need a much bigger one if that was my intention. And I thought, what better way to meet people and express this everyone's invited ethos than just driving it around. serving coffee. I opened the service window, I served coffee, I invited people to sit down and speak with me, and I listened. And it will not surprise any of you in this room, but what I heard time and time again, remarkably consistent, regardless of politics, was people were fed up with politicians, with politics. They had lost faith in Congress, losing faith in their government. But most importantly, their voices were being drowned out by even big money interests. Their quiet voices drowned out by big money interests, and they lost the faith, plain and simple. And that's what inspired me. So I resolved to do my best to return power to people and reduce what I call the influence of affluence. And I think you all know what I'm talking about. It's the corrupting influence of big money in our politics. And then I discovered you in American Promise, and I really found my family, and I want to thank you. I did not know you existed. I didn't know I had my peeps out there. And I don't care about your politics. I do care about your damn principles. And that's what I wish this country would focus a little bit more on. And I want to thank you for inviting me into your family, and you are surely part of mine. And I ask people every time I have the chance to visit, no matter what your number one issue is, and I'm sure it's important, but that you make your number two issue campaign finance reform. Because without it, I'm afraid none of the change that we hope to see will be possible. And the enthusiasm of all of you, what you're doing on the Hill right now, I got to visit with some of the Minnesota crew at the Minnesota State Fair not long ago. By the way, if you want to see a really remarkable cultural institution in the United States, please come to the Minnesota State Fair. I do believe, and I mean this sincerely, Minnesota has some of the highest voter turnout in the country. I think in no small part because we still create spaces and places for communities to come together. And the Minnesota State Fair, for those of you who have seen it will know, it is a remarkable mosaic of all types of people, races, religions, geographies, politics. And I think, frankly, it's what the country needs more than ever. And as I've shared at the fair, I have a booth there and share with many of you, that is my singular focus. I think money in politics is both despicable, disgusting, and corrupting, and I'm trying to walk that talk. You all know there are 535 members of Congress. I am the only one, if you can believe this, the only one that takes no PAC money, no federal lobbyist money, and refuses all money from my fellow members of Congress, and I refuse to give it to them, which makes me unpopular. And I'm one of the handful that does not have a leadership PAC, and I do not give to the DCCC, because that's just money laundering as well. And some ask, why? And I say it's because I've seen firsthand how nauseating this is. I used to be the one that was called on for the contributions. I was the one that was so annoyed I wanted to turn off my phone, avoid any semblance of being contacted around this time. And by the way, I'm still inundated, still, by people sending those shameless pleas for money. You all know this. We have foreign nationals literally contributing to ballot initiatives in this country, a practice that the FEC has said is perfectly legal. We have billionaires, just in the last month, you all know this, contributing entire businesses to the value of over $1.5 billion to dark money groups so that they can in turn sell the business, generate tax-free proceeds, and influence all of us in upcoming elections. And then you've got members of Congress who are spending 10,000 collective hours per week raising money. So think about that number, 10,000 collective hours per week. Extrapolate that over 52 weeks a year, and you understand how nauseating and atrocious this really is. What could you be doing instead with 10,000 collective hours per week? How about meeting with constituents? How about listening to them? How about breaking bread with your colleagues at night? The reason I'm here tonight is I don't have a fundraiser. Yeah, and that's not a laugh line. In fact, I'm free for breakfast, I'm free for lunch. I mean it sincerely. My colleagues constantly running to fundraisers, running to call time, and it's sickening. So what else could you be doing? Building relationships, learning process, investigating policy. Instead, it's all consumed with fundraising. Can you think of another business or industry in which you could spend over half your time, essentially, dedicated to something that has nothing to do with what you were hired to do and actually keep your damn job? No, I don't think so. And let me make this proposition to you. It's not just about the money. Yes, the money does buy influence. We all know that. It's about the time That's my personal mission. It's about the time, because every single one of those 10,000 hours per week, who are they spent with? Yes, you know, people, the wealthiest people, the wealthiest institutions, the wealthiest enterprises in America. That denies the very incentive that we need more than ever right now, which is an incentive for elected officials to spend time with people that are working hard and struggling and don't have the capacity to write multi-thousand-dollar checks to politicians. Therein lies the biggest problem, and that's where I invite all of you to join me in making the case in that manner. Yes, it's about the money, but it's about the time. And we need incentives for members of Congress in state houses and city councils all around the country to spend time with hardworking people. In fact, I recently introduced a bill called the On the Clock Act because I was so disgusted with the inability, actually, to find colleagues to have breakfast with, to go to dinner with. No, this is not a joke. No, well, Rick wants to laugh a little bit. He knows the game. Seriously, I can't find friends to go to dinner with because they have to go to 3 events per night and collect checks. And it sickens me. And most of all, I mean, I hope none of you spend too much time watching C-SPAN, but if you do, you would see, you know how it works. Committee hearings. How many members of Congress actually sit through one full committee hearing? No, never. Because you do your 5-minute, by the way, you don't do 5 minutes to ask a question, you perform for 5 minutes, and then you leave, and most people are going across the street to the DCCC or RNCC to make their calls, right? It's nauseating. So I introduced a bill called the On the Clock Act that would ban members of Congress from fundraising between breakfast and dinner while we're in Washington. Seems reasonable to me. And of course, I'm a supporter of H.R. 1 and just about any initiative that gets this institution to start focusing on what really matters. But I believe, and I know all of you do, because it was you that inspired me to make this proposition, that we need a constitutional amendment to comprehensively and forcefully reform the deluge of money in politics. You know, our Constitution is the arbiter. It's the foundational and ultimate law of the land, and yet we've amended it 27 times in 250 years. So it is a process that was expected and anticipated and considered by our founders. In fact, Thomas Jefferson in 1816 wrote, and I quote him, "We might as well require a man to wear still the coat which fitted him when he was a boy, as civilized society, to remain ever under the regiment of their barbarous ancestors." My jacket is from 16 years ago, but it's not quite that old, but you get the point. Even Thomas Jefferson recognized that this would be a living, breathing document and it would have to keep pace with the times, and it surely hasn't as it relates to campaign finance. I think our founders would be disgusted. I know you would agree. They would be disgusted by the expenditure of $5.7 billion in 2018, not even a presidential election year, $5.7 billion in the 2018 midterms, mostly to throw mud at one another. And if you think about that, $5.7 billion is larger than the gross domestic product of over 40 nations throughout the world. $5.7 billion. The sickening part of this, too, and some of you might know this, despite it being against the rules, checks are handed out on the House floor regularly. And it really, in fact, the first week I was in Congress, or second week, an older member of Congress taps me on the shoulder and hands me a white envelope and says, "Welcome to Congress." And I look at it, and it said Joe Cunningham on it, which made me very pleased because Joe Cunningham was the most handsome member of Congress. Clearly this member had seen me from the back and mistook us because at that time I had a little bit longer hair. But you get the point. They're handing out checks on the House floor, and it's sickening. The propensity to use then money that is received to then share with others in your leadership elections is all part of the same mess. The money inside of Congress, inside of the House, is just as corrupting, just as despicable, and just as corrupt, frankly, as it is outside. And it's the same game. And there are people becoming very, very rich because of the political industrial complex. We all know that. And people are using their leadership PACs to literally finance their lifestyles. And as a member of the House Ethics Committee, I can tell you the sickening number of members of Congress that we have to investigate for using both their MRAs, their member resource allowances, and their campaign funds to enrich themselves. And that's why I believe it's simply time to put an end to this nonsense. It's legalized corruption, and we got to amend the Constitution to ensure that we return power and influence to the very people to which it belongs. But to do that, we need more than just this room. And we need Americans of all backgrounds and political perspectives to make this their priority. You know, if you look at surveys and polls, people do think this is a big deal. But when it really comes down to it, they don't make it amongst their top 1, 2, or 3. And that's, I think, what we have to do. And that's what you're going to be doing this week. And that's why I really want to say thank you. I'm a lonely voice. In fact, I think Ro Khanna and I are the only 2 members of the No PAC caucus, which is good for a leadership post, I should tell you, but nothing else. And that's why I'm so grateful, seriously, that you're all here and have, I think, about 100 meetings scheduled, because this is really where it makes a difference. And I'm grateful to you. And I will share this with you. I think most members of Congress are just as disgusted. It makes them feel dirty. I don't know one person that likes to go across the street and dial for dollars nonstop. It's sickening to have to grovel like that. But they've been consumed by the system, and that's where all of you come in. So when you meet with them, I invite you to ask them what they think of this system. Ask them if they like having to dedicate 20 hours per week to this nonsense. Ask them if they think this is the way to return prestige to the institution, to restore faith in our government. Ask them if they believe that it reflects well on the United States of America. And I'd love to hear what they say. Now, I can't guarantee that you're going to come away from any of these meetings having changed anybody's mind in particular. But I do know that your courage of conviction will force every single person with whom you meet to grapple with their feelings about this, about corruption, and about the money in politics. Now, I do understand that I am the only thing standing between you and free ice cream. So in the interest of brevity, let me just conclude by reminding you that our system of government was designed to make change really difficult, and it works a little bit too well. A constitutional amendment that's universally opposed by the very interests about whom I'm speaking is not going to be an easy task. I think you all know that. But thanks to American Promise and to all of you, change is both possible and, I believe, inevitable over time. And for that, I am profusely and profoundly grateful to all of you. So I ask that you keep in touch, that you keep the faith, and that, most importantly, please find ways to expose this and shine light on it. I will say that I think climate change didn't really get implanted and embedded into the American psyche until there was a documentary done about it. And I think this movement is waiting for that moment, that uncomfortable truth moment where we can really expose what is going on here. I will hopefully be here to see that day, even though I don't plan to be here for 30 years like some of my colleagues. With that said, God bless all of you. Thank you for what you're doing. It is the most important work in America, and the nice thing is whoever gets to call on me in Congress, I'm going to make your lobbying really, really hard. Thanks, everybody.